Hey, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of Clinic Gym Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Josh Satterlee, and it's my pleasure today to be joined by Rick Anderson. Rick, how's it going, bud?
It's going great, man. I appreciate you having me on. Happy to be here.
Good. And Rick, where are you located for all those listeners out there in all parts of the U.S.?
North Carolina. Yeah.
Beautiful. Is that where you're from?
Coast.
Okay.
So I grew up, my parents were military, so I kind of grew up going all over the place. But when I finished high school, we were in the Carolinas. So this is kind of where I ended up.
Awesome.
Which was a long time ago.
There's a couple gray highlights in your beard there. So
it's wisdom.
That's right. And a lot of lessons learned where you hide the scars under that beard, right?
You got it.
Yeah. Now, for those listening out there, I am broadcasting all the way live from a friend's house. And as luck would have it, the dog may bark and offer interjections into our interview, but we'll try and stick with it as best we can. So, Rick, I met you at a marketing automation event, and you happen to volunteer the fact that you're like, oh, yeah, I've been in the fitness game, owned a couple gyms, offer some services, blah, blah, blah. Can you give any idea of what you do now and then back it up to why the heck you would go into that business?
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting little niche. Right now, what I do is help fitness franchises build automation. So at the franchisee level, right? So it helps the software and the logic helps franchisees operate on a daily basis. And then it also rolls data up to the franchisor so they can, have some insight into what's working and what's not working.
So for those listeners who might not understand the model, because some people never dip their toe in franchises, basically if you were, say, and this isn't it, but if you're Orange Theory Fitness, you help the owner of the local Henderson, Nevada Orange Theory Fitness do some things, and then you take all that data and send it upstairs to Orange Theory Corporate to say, here's what we're seeing across all of the locations about these certain things. So we keep a lot of data streaming like that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a fair description. It works both ways. So initially, we'll work with the franchisor, because they've got. Tell me if I get too deep in the weeds here, but franchises start because somebody's got a good idea and good systems for how to run a successful business, right?
Right.
And so, what happens typically, franchisees aren't necessarily the best at executing those systems. And franchisors aren't necessarily the best at providing the structure for them to be able to execute their system. So,
right. It's kind of a clash of two personalities, I think, because inherently a franchisee says, I'm willing to pay whatever, let's just say $150,000 for your systems because I inherently don't have systems, but I recognize the fact they probably make me better. So there are people who don't build the systems as they go and they're like, I'll just buy it. Whereas the franchisors started out as somebody who just had to build the systems along the way or they would have had nothing to franchise.
That's right.
So, and then there's like this clash of like, so here's the greatest hiring story I ever heard, right? This will apply because I love stories. So a friend of mine runs a financial services business. And in that world, the key thing that will end your career faster than anything, you have to have a mofo of a compliance officer. Like in the loans that she does, you have to have every I dotted, every T crossed, and if it has to be in the right color of blue ink and submitted in triplicate, and that one person can end your business for the rest of your life. Like if you get marked from I don't know if it's the trade FTC or whatever, but if you get a bad mark, good luck ever restarting that business, right? Yeah. So she goes out to hire a compliance officer, and she's working with this company, and they say she's asking, how do I find the right person? And this guy who's like a hiring expert goes, all right, here's the question you're going to ask. Once you get down to your final list of less than 10, ask them this question. Let's pretend for a second, and Rick, I'll ask you this question. Let's pretend for a second that you are making chocolate chip cookies for your kids' class, and it's 11 o'clock at night. All the stores are closed in your area. Your kid has to show up tomorrow morning with the chocolate chip cookies. And as you get into the recipe, you realize you don't have baking soda. Now it only calls for a quarter teaspoon of baking soda, but you don't have any in the house. What do you do?
Oh man, you put me on the spot.
Yeah, but what would you do? I mean, seriously, stores are closed. You can't go buy it.
I mean, Honestly, I'd do one of two things. All right. I'd either leave it out, or I would follow the old, you know, how your kids go, mom, 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 and then dad, what? Where's mom? I would go find mom, right? And say, all right, what do I need to do here? So do one of those two things.
Yeah, because you're an entrepreneur. So it's like I would push forward, right?
Right.
So this woman's telling me this story, and she says she asks her four top candidates, what would you do? And one says, I'd go online and find a substitute. You know, can I use something else as a leavener? Yeah. One of them said, my mom lives 3 blocks away. I'd go break into her house, which is kind of cheating, I thought, you know. And finally, so she's asking, she's getting all these answers. And finally, one woman stops and looks at her and it's like, what do you mean? And she says, you're making cookies, you know, you run out of baking soda. And
why would you put baking soda?
No, the woman's like, I don't understand the question. She's like, it's real simple. You're making cookies, the store's closed. She's like, yeah, but I would never start making cookies until I confirmed I had all the ingredients. I don't understand your question.
There you go.
And she's like, boom, you're my gal.
Hired. I wouldn't have gotten the job.
Right. But you're not a compliance guy, right? Like that,
right.
Like we don't, yeah. And neither am I. So I'm just saying that at the essence, the franchisors are probably sitting there thinking when they're looking at their 100 franchisees going, how come you can't organize this? I don't understand why it's so hard, because inherently they're, you know, system builders versus system buyers, and there's a difference of opinion there. So anyways, that's a long diatribe to go into the fact that you work in a franchise fitness model. You were a franchisee, right? And now you're a servicer of the franchisees and franchisor.
Yep.
Okay.
Got it.
Cool. So that road was probably not easy to get to when you're like, hey, I'm going to end up offering the service. So if we go back, you started out as a franchisee, right?
Yeah.
Tell us about that. So there you are, like this young, hungry, good looking dude. You're like, man, I want to get in the fitness game, baby.
Yeah. I was in my mid 20s and kind of come across this. I always had a kind of an entrepreneurial itch and had come across this franchise system that seemed to be a good fit of being able to do business and, you know, follow something that I had an interest in, which was fitness. And I came across this particular franchise and went and begged my parents to loan me some money so I could start it. And they were kind enough to oblige, and moved up to Charlotte and opened my first location in early 2004. And, you know, I got really fortunate because in 2004, the economy was really good. So anything that it made up for everything that I really wasn't very, very good at from an operational standpoint. But nevertheless,
this is when you wear an orange shirt one day and you're like, oh, business okay. You show up in blue the next day and you're like, oh, I think the market responds to blue because I have 3 new customers today.
That's right.
The market's just that great. You can do anything you want.
And so as things, things went really well that first year or so, and it exploded. We had lots of trainers that had interest in opening their own locations. So we were able to kind of foster an environment where I helped develop these folks, even as I was developing myself. And over the next several years, the market grew to 12 locations, and 4 of which I had ownership in.
Wow. Okay. And that's just in the Charlotte area.
That was just in the Charlotte area. Right. And so to bridge the gap between then and where I am now, I realized as we started to grow that we were doing things really inconsistently, not just on an individual location basis, but from location to location. And, you know, there's clearly, there's always the best way to do something, right? I mean, within reason. And so I found that we needed a process in place to not only uncover what the best way was, but to make sure once we knew what it was, that we could execute that consistently at a single location. And then if we executed it at one location, it was being done the exact same way at the other locations.
I'm going to pause you real quick.
Yeah.
We're going to definitely cover that. I just want to go back for a second. You're busy. You're getting clients left and right to the point where you can open up 4 locations. How big are these locations on average? Roughly, are they between 1,000 and 2,000?
Great question. Yeah, usually in the 1,500 square foot range. Okay.
And each one has how many worker bees at each one?
Probably have you scale obviously as you grow, but a mature location would have probably 5 or 6 on staff, depending on the makeup of full-time to part-time.
And you guys mostly sold 1 hour, one-on-one personal training sessions. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. It was primarily, I'd say 90% was one-on-one. That was kind of our niche.
A higher service market than say like a CrossFit where you have like the large group and.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. Okay.
Without question.
Yeah. And all these models work. So everybody listening, like if you have a model you want to pursue, like they all work if you do them right. And Rick's going to kind of explain how he made them work. I just want to give some people some context here. So as you're going through, you got a couple locations open, you're hiring people left and right. And I know that I've hired some fitness people and they're incredibly reliable. They're incredibly, they don't ever do anything except that which you tell them to do. I'm trying to think of other BS statements to make right now, but they may have their own opinion how to do things and they may not show up on time, or they may call in sick really late, or, not show up. So you're dealing with all the headaches of a business owner in that. What was the first pressure you felt like, hey, we got to actually build a system here? Was it getting new members? Was it scheduling your staff? Was it payroll?
Well, let me, if it's okay, and if you don't want to go down this road, this is fine, but let me back up just a little bit, because in order to get to 2, 3, 4 locations, you have to have one location that runs directly first, right? And then you have a whole
what I'm trying to avoid here is, like, a lot of times when guys are successful like you, we jump over those lily pads of death early on and we're like, no, it was all smooth sailing. And it's like right before you built that bridge.
That's right.
Like, what was it like when the river was still raging, man?
That's right. So from a single location standpoint, the hurdles we had to cross were, when you open up a business, or, for your listeners, if they're adding this business onto their existing business, you've got multiple hats you're wearing, right? So when we opened, I was not only the owner, but I was the manager, I was the trainer, I was the, cleaning crew. I went and got the water. You have all these hats that you wear.
Lead sales guy, head of the marketing department.
All that stuff. And so in order to focus on the actual business growth processes, right? So these would be things like marketing, sales. I had to provide enough space in my schedule to be able to spend the time doing the things that were actually going to drive growth in the studio. And as much fun as training is, and as easy as it is as an owner to go, oh, well, if I train this session, I'm going to save this much on payroll. You're cutting your nose off to spite your face, right? So I had to replace myself. If I were to put a hierarchy in these positions or these hats that I was wearing, you have, to keep it super simple, you have trainer, then above them in the organizational chart would be the manager, and then above them would be, the owner. And so in order to focus on just managerial and ownership tasks, I had to replace myself as a trainer. So that became, priority number 1, hire, find a good person, replace myself. And once I've done that, I've allowed space in my schedule to be more effective and more efficient and more competent at the managerial and ownership tasks. And as the studio continued to grow, the next step was to hire a manager to replace myself at the management level. And that, that's actually probably an easier part of the process if you've hired good at the trainer level, because somebody is going to stand out with that skill set. So I ended up promoting one of the better trainers up to a management position. And then that allowed me to take just the ownership role and really focus on providing support and leadership for each of those other levels in the organizational chart, and to focus on the activities that were directly tied to driving the business.
All right, let me stop you right there, because all of my listeners too, in addition to what you just said, also are acting not just as trainer, but also as clinician,
right?
Head medical director, owner of a clinic. So they're doubling down. So let me ask you this question on a broad strokes. Every situation is different, and everybody's going to tell us that their business is different. And we know that that's 100% false, but we'll just allow them that belief. When would you suggest they hire a trainer? What is the sign that you need to hire a trainer?
Well, I think in the case that you're describing with broad strokes, I mean, it would be out of the gate, right?
Okay.
So if
So when the doors open.
yeah, as soon as the doors open, I mean, I would
Okay.
not expect, and again, broad strokes here. I won't keep adding that caveat, but I would think that there are activities that your listeners should be doing that are, not to diminish it, but far above trainer pay grade.
Yeah.
Right. Things they should be focused on. So it would be out of the gate.
Okay.
Right, number one.
I agree. Like I always tell people, as soon as the thought crosses your mind, I need to hire somebody to do this.
Yeah.
You're too late in anything. I mean, I don't care if you're an accountant. If you're like, I need to hire somebody to take these books off my back, you probably are past the point where you need somebody. And I just recently had a call with somebody. They're like, yeah, I'm going to wait till I'm busier to hire a trainer. I'm like, you're looking at it backwards. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, how could you possibly get busier? How can you, I'm going to market, I'm going to do this. It's like, well, then who's filling the training? Oh, and by the way, treating clients, and by the way, cleaning the place. And, so I know that's easy. I'm sure there's listeners out there going, yeah, I don't have the money to do it. And it's like, when you hire somebody, remember, you don't hire them full-time right out of the gate, even if it's a few hours a week. Yep. Somehow it works out. Somehow. I don't know the universal power of the world, but it works out if you just hire a little bit.
I think one of the most important things in that, Josh, is that you have to take the time that's been added to your schedule. Mm-hmm. And I think what a lot of people run into is like, okay, I've got this time. Now what do I do?
Yeah.
I'm going to go be a marketer. It's like, you have to invest in your education and your understanding of, what does it take to be a good marketer? How am I going to drive leads in? If this is now my role and my job, would I go hire somebody with my skill set to do what I'm now doing? And if the answer is no, then you need to add those things to your skill set or go hire somebody that had it. I mean, I remember when that hit me, I got on, there's obviously tons of gurus out there. I kind of, the Dan Kennedy camp, and I bought basically every book. And for a year, I just consumed everything I could. Because
for those people listening, Dan Kennedy is one of the more famous copywriters and direct response marketing gurus out there, and has, it's a whole tribe of people who follow that model, and his stuff's great.
And whether it's him or somebody else, the point is you've got to invest in your education if you're going to be fulfilling that role.
Okay. All right. So there you are. You're feeling this pressure. You had the one successful location. It gave you the cojones to say, we could do this again and again. And I'm skipping over some steps because I kind of want to get to what you ended up doing. But so what system did you build when you felt like it created the most ROI? Let's just say that in any sense, time, money, Rick's ability to take Friday afternoons off, whatever it was. What system did you build that you're like, man, this produced an ROI here?
Do you mean like literally the system, the platform that I'm using, or do you think more of like a process or a procedure?
Yeah, a process in the business. So let me give you some options. Like, hey, we built a system to get us leads, or we built a system to take leads and follow up with them until they come in, or we did an internal system so that every one of our clients is onboarded the right way. They, get the waiver and their first session's awesome, and they get sent a, thank you card and high five, and everybody knows their name, and we got all their billing information. Or was it an NPS score, like just automating, collecting an NPS score?
So great question. We were very fragmented, right? So we had lots of little systems, everything that you've kind of laid out there, simple stuff like, this is how we welcome clients into the studio system, right? Like over documented, everything. The problem was that we didn't have any glue that brought the whole thing together into one vision. If you think about, the Patriots, love them or hate them, they're excellent because everybody on the team, they've got a good game plan, number one, and everybody on the team understands what the game plan is and knows how to execute it, right? Like, it's very well run. So we had all these different.
Here's the craziest thing I've ever heard about the Patriots, and I respect.
No, I know. I'm sure
no. I'm serious. This is just Bill Belichick before every game goes up to the refs and asks the refs 3 questions about certain trick plays. Have you heard this story before?
Yeah.
And based on their response, he goes back in the locker room and says, "Hey, we're going to play the refs as a position 1 or position 3 or whatever." knowing that they will call certain things or not call certain things based just upon that. And I think when you're at that level, that's tertiary or beyond, where you're thinking about the game to see how will the refs react. And I mean, just the fact that he's systematized that and the team knows what the hell it means is unbelievable to me.
Yeah. Unreal. Awesome example. And so ultimately we had a bunch of plays, if you will, different little systems for different parts of the business, but they weren't put together into a book. They didn't have anything cohesive that brought everything together.
You weren't running the West Coast offense or
It was, it was just a little bit of a mess. We were trying hard. We were trying to do the right thing.
Now, was this because, a lot of people, this usually starts from, you probably have a very motivated crew who's trying to improve the place, and in improving the place comes up with a quote unquote better way of doing things
all the time. And when you have that happen, multiple different time slots, different trainers, you end up with not a consistent way of doing stuff. Right.
My wife gets these M&Ms for our kids. They get as a treat from Trader Joe's, and they're the same color palette as M&Ms. So they're red, yellow, green, blue, brown.
Right.
But the tone is way different. They look dingy to me.
Right.
And I just think this is a perfect example. Like the guy on the day shift color machine is going full vibrant, and the other guy is like a little bit depressed, with his life working swings.
Right.
So his colors are just, man, they're a little, they're still chocolate covered pieces, like, hey, everything's good. It's like, they're so far away from M&Ms. It's crazy. So,
it makes me think of something that's important, and we can go down this road if you want now, or we can wait. But it definitely, I think, plays a role in what we're talking about. All of these little systems are designed to create a great experience, or they should be, right? I mean, the reality is that fitness is in very large part a commodity. There's a million different places that people can go to do this. They can do it online. They can do group. They can do small group. They can do large group. They can do gym membership. They can do cycling, yoga, whatever, right? Like there's a myriad of options. And so really the only two advantages that a personal training studio or a gym can have is, number one, their systems, their processes. They can have a system advantage. They can be better in that area. And
this would be like the McDonald's version. We have a better system, but we don't claim that the food quality is great or the whatever. Right. Yeah. But we'll just outproduce you.
And the other, and I mean those systems all the way from lead gen to retention to fulfillment, all those, like you just got a systemic advantage. And number two would be an experience.
Okay.
Right. Like you've got to be better. One of the great things about personal training is that it is personal, right? It's not like buying if I go buy a bike on Amazon or eBay, I don't care who it comes from. It's the same bike, right? If I'm purchasing fitness from somebody, it totally matters who I'm purchasing because I'm spending quality time. And what it does is if you create an incredible environment, create an incredible experience, it's obviously going to serve retention, right? So keeping your clients around.
Right. Which is one of the biggest growths in all fitness is retention. You solve that game, you're ahead of the curve.
And it also builds relationship capital, right? Some other option. They're always going to be looking, right? Because they can't help it because we're bombarded with fitness marketing all day long. But you don't ever want their head to turn, right? It's almost like, I don't care what they're offering. Josh is my guy. That's it. He's my guy. We're connected. So I didn't mean to go down a rabbit trail there, but you were talking about these systems and the M&M analogy, and it being just a little bit off matters. It really does matter.
Yeah. So so that we don't tease our listeners a little bit, if you identify the most important systems, and I'm going to guess these are also the ones you decided to offer as a service, but in order, what would you, if you had your magic wand for a day and like, hey, I'm talking to all the franchisors of Josh's fitness, what would you tell them to systematize in order? So it would first be,
the first thing I would systemize would be the in-gym experience.
Okay,
right?
So person in your gym.
Maybe that's too broad, but it would be everything that, and so I'm kind of I always default systems now in my brain to, automation and logic and platforms, that sort of thing. So I'm trying to step back from that for a second. The most important thing is the quality of what the customer is experiencing from the time you walk in the door.
So let's slice that even thinner. And by the way, the crazy thing to me, Rick, is you telling your story about how different it was. It was that different while you're running franchises, which should be the most standardized version of a business, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, but you weren't creating out of whole cloth every day. You already had the book of how to run it. And it was just, so you were making the M&Ms, but it's just how we make those M&Ms that was wildly different, right? So let's break it down. So like, if we say that, how about slicing it down to the first 4 workouts of somebody, all right? Or the first 2 weeks or whatever we want to say.
Okay.
If we were to standardize that piece, what are some of the aspects you would suggest that they standardize within there?
I mean, obviously there'd be an incoming assessment, right?
Okay.
Which I would expect that, your listeners coming from the background that they're coming from, that'd probably be a piece of cake to put together. Right. Some sort of standardized, here's where they are, right?
Okay. Yep.
And then they'd need, the next thing I would put together is, what is your philosophy on achieving results?
Okay.
How is it that you guys do what you do in the actual training session, right? Mm-hmm. So it can't be, and I know this from experience, you can't just say, you know what, Larry's a great trainer. Larry, do your thing, right? Mike's a great trainer too. Sarah's a good trainer. You guys just look, I hired you. I trust you. Go do your thing, right? You've got to have some sort of system, and it may not be like down to the exact exercise, rep count, set count. It might be in some cases, particularly people coming from your background, if it's more rehabilitative or corrective in nature. But if it's just overall fitness, I think you give them lanes to work within. So you give them enough room to be creative, but they still fall into the structure of how we do things. And here's one of the big reasons for that. Obviously we want standardization, but your trainers are going to come and go. Okay. That's just the reality of the business.
Right. And trainers, accountants, lawyers, graphic artists, everything, like business is always changing. So it's not just the fitness business.
As important as that personal relationship is, like I was talking about a second ago, it can't be the basis for why people are with you. It's part of it, but it can't be the largest chunk of the pie, because if Larry, the great trainer, decides to go open his own place or goes to work for somebody else and the system is Larry, then your clients are going to be gone.
Yeah. I've heard some sad stories about that. A friend of mine in New York City basically didn't have the right paperwork, contracts, all that stuff in place, and his head trainer left, started 2 blocks away, took 40% of his business away overnight.
That's brutal.
Overnight. Yeah.
And I'll tell you, man, even with the right paperwork in place, it's exceptionally hard to enforce.
Yeah.
Non-compete.
That's a culture problem, like the only way, like you just make such a great culture they wouldn't want to leave, is that's the closest thing we have to a guarantee, but even that's not guaranteed.
That's right.
Anyway, so would this work? I'm just trying to get those people who've never systematized anything thinking about this. We set up 4 workouts. The first one, our system is, and would Rick's Fitness work here? 30-minute workout out of the hour and a 30-minute show and tell. I'm going to walk you around the gym, show you where the bathroom is, show you where the foam rollers are, show you where the dumbbell rack is, tell you how to find the dumbbell numbers, which seems like a ridiculously simple thing for so many people. But if we do that on our first day, here's the jump ropes, here's the mats, here's the, it goes in this order, put your keys here, all that stuff. And by the way, let's just double check we got a waiver and your billing information. That's day 1. Day 2 is, hey, we're going to go over our favorite leg exercises. And the reason we do that is we feel that our training philosophy is to prevent injury. You need to be strong in your foundation, which is your legs. So we train legs every day or every time you're here. I want to take you through a couple different terminologies we use: hip hinge, deadlift, split squat, lunge, and then we're going to do another 30-minute workout. Day 3 is we do a lot of pulling exercises for the upper body. We do cable rows, one-arm rows, kettlebell rows, pull-ups, chin-ups. Here's what we do. Here's how to use this. Here's the equipment we use. Here's where the bars are. Here's where the boxes are. Blah, blah, blah. 30-minute workout. Day 4 is I want to talk to you about our cardio options. We use 4 major things: the air bike, jump rope, battle ropes, and the rower. I want to make sure you understand how to use each one of those. 30-minute workout. Now, your 5th workout, you can join any trainer for anything, but now we know that you've been onboarded. Would that system be okay?
I think yes, absolutely. I think you have to reverse engineer based on what your product or service offering is, right? So if this is ultimately, they're going to fall into, this small group model, if you will, then yes, I think what you're describing, a lot of times it's referred to as a 101 type scenario in the fitness industry, where you're spending a number of sessions in advance, teaching them movements, teaching them where everything is, like what you're talking about, so that when they get into that small group environment, they're prepared, and because they're not going to have one-on-one attention, right? Whether they're in small group or large group, they're going to have something less than 100% of the instructor's attention. So it's really important in that case to do exactly what you're talking about. Spend your time going through all those things. That may look a little bit different, those first 4 sessions, if the model is one-on-one training, right? In that case, because you're there with them, you may just do, an intro session where you show them around, get them comfortable, introduce them to people, do an assessment. And then your next sessions, you're really kind of getting into it, right? Because you're there with them for every exercise and you're controlling what they're doing. In that case, you can kind of jump right into it based on what their assessment shows you, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But to build a system out of what we're talking about is just identify what you want to do on those first 4 visits. Absolutely. And then write that on a piece of paper and laminate it, because when it's laminated, it lasts forever.
If it's laminated, it's law and everybody will do it. No doubt.
That's right.
And if you put it on the wall, it's a done deal.
That's gospel then, right? That's better than burning or stone tablets. Yeah. But in all seriousness, if you just had those 4 sheets, and no matter where you're at, hey, when it's a new client and they're on visit, 3rd workout, here's what we always do in 3rd workout. That is the start of a system. And I think if we measured a gym that did that just on the first 4 workouts versus just went freehand, I think we're going to end up with a better business.
No doubt. No doubt about it.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So that'd be your first vote for what to do. Because everybody who doesn't have a business, or everybody that is from outside the business, goes, the number one thing is get new leads, right? But most of the time, there are many businesses that have died of indigestion rather than starvation, meaning they got way too many leads. Yeah. And by the way, when you use those leads and bring them into a crappy system, they now hate your business. Before they're indifferent. But now they hate it. Right. So they're guaranteed not to come back. Yep. So if we did that, standardize that first part, then what would your next system you would suggest building be?
I think at that point, I would probably shift. Once I felt like we had the experience, at least facing the right direction, right? Like you're always going to be there's always going to be improvements. The next thing I would focus on would be lead gen.
Okay.
Probably. If we're talking you want to say like from a kind of a global business perspective? Yeah, because I think once you've got a good product, it's time to start bringing people in, because you got to provide funds to operate the business. Yeah. But a very close second to that would be retention processes, because it's a lot less expensive to keep a client than it is to get a new one.
So if I were opening month 1, focus on the first onboarding, on-ramping, initial client experience.
I'll stop you there for just a second. That would be like month -2.
Okay.
Right. Cool. 2 months before you open, that should be 100% dialed in, so that you're not,
Okay.
costs
Yeah.
associated before you open.
This is
You
like
should be
making
marketing
sure,
before you open.
yeah, this is making sure you have a crib and diapers before you bring the kid home from the hospital, you're saying.
That's right. Exactly.
You don't be like, I know we got the
exactly
kid.
right.
We're going to stop by Target on the way home and we'll see how it works out, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you are.
so-
Sure. That'll go well.
So, all right. So we figure out what we're going to do and then actually use that. And as simple as writing it down and like printing it out in Google Docs and laminating it, that's your first system. Second system, lead generation. There are
Yep.
tomes and encyclopedic volumes written about how to get lead generation. Again, sticking broad. You've done it. You've seen it. You've seen other franchisees do it. Give us some highlights of what you would suggest. Should I buy billboard space? Run an ad on the 6 o'clock news,
Yeah,
or
I think it really depends on the market. I think the first thing that I would do if I were, given what you've explained about your audience, is that they've already got a list, right? They've already got a captive audience. So
I hope so.
before I spent any money on external marketing, I would go hardcore into that internal list.
Okay.
I mean, you don't have to get super crazy in any CRM to be able to email blast folks, but I would put together
A CRM is customer relationship management. That could be,
yes.
yeah. You and I use Infusionsoft, super high level. A simple one would be MailChimp. That'd be fine. Tracks all your people. You're going to send an email.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we just need to market to your internal the list that you already have, right? And
I have a funny experience. Like, I'm glad you're saying this because when I say it, I don't know. People assume I don't have any idea what I'm talking about, but it's like you're an expert outside of your town, but in your town, you're not.
Right. Yeah. That happens in my home.
Every person I've ever worked with, there's two camps. There's the I don't want to email them. They're not really going to be interested. And then there's the I did email them. And I was blown away how many people were interested.
Yes.
There's nothing in between those two poles. It's like, it's not going to work, but I haven't actually done anything and I've done anything and holy crap, that was awesome.
I that's one of the biggest hurdles. I'm glad you brought that up. I think that's one of the biggest hurdles that people have to overcome when they're kind of starting this is the fear that, I'm emailing them too much or I'm annoying them. And there's a couple of things to keep in mind, which number one, I love this quote. I forget who said it, but it goes, "You'd care a lot less about what people thought of you if you knew how seldom they did." Right? Like they're not, most people are not getting your emails. The ones that are not reading them. Right.
Yeah.
So sending the same email or a similar version of it, a revision of it, 3 or 4 times over the course of a week or two to the same list they're probably only going to get read once.
Dude,
right?
I worked my butt off to get like a 40% open rate, which, as we know in that world, is
huge.
That's a 40% open rate. So most of my emails are not being opened. And then if you take that 40% and remove my family members, it's probably a 30% open rate. And then you take the readability and the reading rate. One of my emails, I put a line in there: if you're reading this far, let me know and I'll send you $20. And I sent out one $20 gift card for Starbucks. And I was like,
oh, that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. But it's just like ridiculous. And, I'm sending out thousands a week. And so anyways, people won't do it. But, even a flyer up, and I think putting a flyer at the front desk, if you're running a clinic saying, hey, we're going to start this gym, blah, blah, blah. Forget the fact that people are reading it. It acts as a cue card for you to go, hey, Rick, by the way, did I tell you about our gym? And the best thing you can hear is, yeah, you told me the last 3 times I've been in here. And it's like, okay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
When would you like to come by and check it out?
Right. Getting your customers to know what you're offering is about, you need the repetitions about as many times you need to teach your kids to say please and thank you.
That's right. That's a great
6,000-7,000 times they usually start breaking through.
So. Well, and to your point, you have to think, again, it's easy to default. Well, I emailed them. They know about it. They're not interested. Right. You have to use all which is totally inaccurate. You have to use all the different channels. So I would all to my internal list first. I would email, I would direct mail, I would text message, face-to-face, and I'd call them. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's
and if you're good at Facebook marketing, throw them in a Facebook throw an ad to retarget them.
Yeah, you can put in the Facebook custom audience and get them there too. Sure.
Hey, by the way, we're opening our gym this day. Yeah, I just think you can do all that. Like remind them on Facebook you're starting on a certain date.
And there's an easy way. One of my mentors, explained to me one time, he's like, you have this fear that you're going to be annoying or be perceived as an a-hole in your in all of your communications because you're marketing to folks. It's like there's an easy way to avoid that. It's like, don't be an a-hole. Don't be annoying. Like when you're sending out this content, anytime you're sending out content, it needs to be much more about serving them than serving yourself. Right. So if your messaging is always, hey, come see our gym. Come see our gym. Sign up to see our gym. Have you heard about our gym? Check out our gym. Pay money to our gym.
Cool.
That's annoying.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it's, hey, we're opening up this gym. These are some of the benefits that our clients are going to be receiving. Do you have any questions about how this might help you? Here's a video we put together. Like deliver value, build up relationship capital with that person. It's just so important.
Which in our world is, luckily we have a huge advantage here because as healthcare providers, we have cared about these people and brought them from brink of disaster back. And they're very appreciative of that early on in that relationship. So you already have a leg up if you're in this model. So that's internal list lead generation. I just want to move forward. We can capture all this lead generation. Yes. And then what would be the next system?
Retention.
All right.
I mean, so you'd have to parallel, right? Like lead gen is obviously number 2 in that system. The first thing I would do inside lead gen would be use my internal list. Okay. And then I would get together with an expert that's good at external lead gen because it's a very complicated thing. Can
you give anybody some direction there? What are we looking for? Or,
you're looking for, obviously,
because as soon as you start looking at Facebook ads, you will be inundated with quote unquote gurus who will teach you how to make $1 million in 4 minutes.
Yeah, that's right. Are you wanting me to suggest names off the top of my head?
If you have any that, we're not saying these are the only ones, but I could name some untrustworthy ones, but I don't like to blast people. But if you know any,
I don't want to do that. There's a lot more untrustworthy ones than there are trustworthy ones. I would say that I would look at, you could look at Gym Launch if you wanted to. They've got a really good reputation from lead gen stuff. And then lead gen, you're in the fitness space, but the process of lead gen, you kind of either get it or you don't. So undoubtedly you have other people in your area that you've worked with, other professionals. I would talk to them about who they use for that kind of stuff because it's also nice to have somebody local. Obviously technology allows us now to be able to work with anybody all over the world, but that's where I'd start on external stuff. Ultimately though, who you stick with on any lead gen, it's got to be a numerical decision, right? An ROI number decision. Oh, it can't be, Chad's great. Yeah. We got 0.04% return, but he's an awesome guy and he totally knows what he's doing, right? Like the numbers have to drive that.
Meaning if you put in $1,000, the amount back that you can measure needs to be greater than that $1,000.
Well, yeah. And really, ROI there's a couple different ways to slice it up, and it can get super complicated. But really, you should be looking at, you have to know your lifetime value of a client before you can really evaluate your ROI.
Hey, I want to tell you all about Membrant. Membrant, with a D in there like Rembrandt. Membrant is an app platform. Now, this company is the one who built the Clinic Gym Hybrid app. And if you purchase our accelerator program, you will get firsthand knowledge of what they do. But I think this is the next evolution in clinics who want to really give their patients better care, better service, while making it more convenient. So what Membrant can do is help you design a custom app for your company. This isn't just like rebranding somebody else's. This is your app that lives on the App Store and your patients can download. Now, what's the power of an app? Well, let's just say, for example, that you have a certain protocol that you want your low back pain patients to go for. So let's say you include the McGill Big Three, a little talk about repetitive motions and finding your kind of McKenzie protocol of reducing your pain through those repetitive asymptomatic movements. Well, you could tag the patients, meaning that you kind of put them on a list that says you want them to have access to the low back protocols, right? And then you could have another program of videos, articles, exercise descriptions, all that only go out to your patients with shoulder pain, right? Or ones that go out to patients with plantar fasciitis. If you can build that program, then what Membrane can help you do is make sure that only the patients that really need the plantar fasciitis exercises get that delivered to their phone. That thing that they're staring at, some estimates say as many as 500 times a day, all right? So check out membrant.com, or send me an email. I can hook you up with those guys and they can put together a fantastic program. I think it's really the future, and it's one more way that technology will help you make more money while providing better care and a better business model. So check out membrant.com.
Back to the systems. First one is, what happens when you get a new client? How are we training them? How do we share our philosophy? How do we teach them? Second thing is start lead generation. Lead generation is hit up your internal list, which is going to be the least amount of friction and the highest reward. They already know, they know they've been to your location, for God's sakes, which is, people don't tell you, that's half the battle in getting people to show up for these fitness consults. It's like, can they actually find your place?
Yeah.
And then retention. Two things I want to go over before, and I want to be respectful of your time, but retention strategies and or external lead gen, and the thought of using text message, phone, because a lot of people go, oh, I'll generate all these leads for you, but they don't tell you the big work, the system needs to be built, is not getting them to respond to a Facebook ad. It's, let's say you get 100 people to respond to a Facebook ad. What do you do between that and them walking in the door and handing you a credit card? That's where, that's the most overlooked, underspoken thing. I don't know why. Nobody talks about that piece. Right. So you want to talk about that or retention?
Let's talk about that. I mean, retention's an easy, I can do retention in 10 seconds, right? Like, well, maybe we'll save that for another call. I don't want to undermine it, but I mean, provide a great experience, serve your people, right? Like, go read, what is it? The Gold Standard, the Ritz-Carlton, go read the,
I've never read it. Yeah.
Experience. Okay. Any of those things, we're in an experience-based economy now, so you've got to provide an amazing experience. All right. Sorry.
Cool.
Get down that.
No.
You're absolutely correct, right? When you're looking at the quote unquote pipeline, which is, the process that people work their way through, they start as a lead and ultimately we want them to become a client at the other end of the pipeline. That crucial segment is what happens between those two, right? Like your lead, you're trying to push them to come in for a consult is usually kind of the way it works out. So you asked me what systems we do for that portion of it?
Like some guideposts there for people. Like this is what nobody told me that I wish somebody had.
Okay.
You run some Facebook ads, you're going to end up with a list of say 100 leads. So what do you do with them? With
those leads, obviously the first thing the most crucial thing is understanding what you're trying to accomplish initially with that lead. Let's assume it's a consult in this case.
Yeah.
So you want to make it as easy as possible for them to schedule a consult. You can use different platforms out there to accomplish that, or you can go old school, which works well, particularly in the beginning, which is like pick up the phone, email them. You need to have a conversation with them first, right? Like we're trying to get a dialogue started so that we can use that dialogue to get them comfortable enough to schedule.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep. And I think if you're unwilling to pick up the phone, you must be unwilling to make money.
That's right.
Like in the gym business, the phone cannot be you cannot overstate the importance of the phone. Especially in that initial. Yeah. Everybody I know inside the gym business that's successful goes, use the phone. Everybody outside, well, I don't really want to call people. My clients don't do bullshit. Excuse my language.
That's not even remotely true.
If that thing's not dialing outbound, you ain't making money.
That's right. So, there are some typically when you're trying to get somebody to schedule a consult or get a dialogue started, regardless of the medium that you're using, again, going back to what I said in the emails for your internal list, is you got to provide value. It's like, how can I help you? I see that you're interested in working with us in Josh's gym. What sort of things are you trying to accomplish? ? Or what have you been doing lately? ? Right? Like, how can I help you? You have to have this mindset in any of your communication of, how can I serve you?
Right.
Okay. And so then there's the other part of the process, which is, okay, let's say that you kind of dialed in your content, what you're going to say when you're on the phone. You got your phone sales. All these things would fall under phone sales, right? Like, what are we going to say when we're on the what are we going to say when we're on the phone? And then the next part of that is, once you get them scheduled, it's now we want to make sure that they show up, right? So we're breaking up this whole process into little chunks and then looking at each of those chunks and trying to optimize them. Sorry, I'm falling into my automation brain with optimization, but
that's all right. That's all right.
That they schedule and show, I would be sending them information on the gym. I'd be sending them success stories of people that have come in and done well. These are things we want to ensure that they don't have scheduler's remorse, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yes. So how do we reduce that? Phone calls, welcoming, phrasing it a little bit of like, hey, I can't wait till I meet you, Rick. I'm looking forward to our meeting on Thursday at 3 p.m.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff goes a long way, right?
Absolutely. I mean,
and
just communicate with them. Pretend you were on the other side of the equation, and what would you want? What would you like? What would you like to? What kind of experience would you want to be the recipient of? Somebody that's super attentive to the fact that. Let's back up to something kind of global for a second. Like, coming into a gym and working with a personal trainer for a lot of people is an emotional thing, right? Like, typically it's not the person that's got their fitness all dialed in, right? Like, there are certainly those outliers, but typically it's somebody that's unhappy with the way they look, unhappy with the way they feel, unhappy that they can't get on the ground and roll around with their kids, and they're trying to change their lives. So that's an emotional thing. So anything that you can do in the onboarding process, which is anything from capturing the lead to getting them signed up, to make them comfortable with you, is going to increase the likelihood that you get the result that you want.
So if you were to guess how much time it takes from a lead, so somebody signs up as a lead. When you look at phone calls, text messages, emails, and all that, is there a number you could guide people to say, like, you're doing enough, or here might be an issue? Like, I've never heard of anybody reaching out one time and getting that person, like, consistent, getting people to show up after one contact.
Not consistently. Sorry, my 2-year-old just got up. Not consistently. Certainly it happens, right? Like, so this is an important thing. I know I'm kind of bouncing around here, but I don't want people to miss this. The speed at which you get back to somebody that's inquired about your service is crucial, right? So let's say you generate a lead. You have some sort of process that notifies you of that, right? Whether it's through an email notification to you. I mean, you need to have a system in place that is on top of it. You're either texting them or you're calling them ASAP, right? Because they're at a point emotionally where they just said, all right, you know what? I got to do this. And we all know that with our health and our fitness, you kind of ride these waves, like, I feel pretty good about myself. I'm good. And then whatever, you walk past the mirror the wrong way and you're just like, oh my God, this has gone south. It's when it's gone south that they're filling out the form, that they're taking it. You got to get the conversation started right then. So the speed of following up with people is hugely important. I didn't want to miss that.
Okay. And when we're saying speed, like, is it in terms of days?
Yeah. I'll tell you what we do. When a lead comes in any of our systems, within 3 minutes, that lead is getting a text from the appropriate person at the location. Now, this is automated.
Wow.
That's saying, hey, I just want to let you know, or something, I can't remember the exact context, but it's introducing themselves and saying, hey, I saw that you're interested in working with us. I'll give you a call just as soon as I can. Is there anything can you tell me what you've been doing lately? Something like that, right? Like something to get the dialogue started. And then the person in our gyms is being notified that they have a new lead. And so as soon as they can pick up the phone and call that person, they're going to. I think our text says something, I'll give you a call and just as soon as I can, or something like that. I can't remember the exact context. So I think when you're like back out again, 10,000 foot per second, because we're talking about these different systems and when to implement them. There's an evolution in your systems, right? Like you have to start with, what is it we want to do? If I was to create the perfect scenario where I only had one person to do this for, and I was doing it myself personally, what would that look like? Right? So that helps you create the experience. And then the next evolution is, okay, how do I make this whole thing a lot easier to do on a regular basis? And that's where systems like automation type systems come into play. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I think we both ended up meeting each other at a automation workshop because like the reason Rick keeps going back to, I'm trying to keep this high level, is I think what you're doing a great job of, Rick, is presenting the problem. And then obviously after you encounter this problem a few times, you go back and you're like, let me, solve this with the technology, which is how you ended up with all these things. And then that's when you saw how powerful it was. I'm guessing that's why you now offer it to other people going, your life doesn't have to be this hard. Let me show you how easy this can be.
That's right. I mean, it's funny. I kind of joke with my wife about this, but I mean, this whole business that I do now really grew out of, I'm going to say being lazy, but that's not really, I say it kind of jokingly. Like if I can automate something, why would I not?
There's an interesting philosophy in there because here's the other thing that I don't think gets enough credit in the automation game. As soon as you have it set up, I'm going to say this to make it impactful, but as soon as you have it set up that, hey, every person that comes in for their first workout gets an email afterwards, or forget it. Let's say you don't even have a gym, you only have your clinic. You come in for your initial exam. After that, you get an email and it's automated. It's great that it's automated, but the power is the fact that it's actually occurring every single time.
That's right.
It is a true system. And if you could have an employee do that every single time and the email was exactly the same and it went out exactly the right amount of time afterwards and it went to exactly the right email address on file and did all that, that would be awesome. But
it would be super expensive too. And
and that person might get sick and they might go through divorce and they might, move across the country. And so it gets harder and harder, but man, having that system. So when you see these businesses, especially franchises, like one of the reasons they're able to sell the system to somebody is they identified the problem and then they built a system and solved it, usually with technology that just occurs every single time. And now that fact that it occurs every single time, let's say that one email gives you 0.03% improved outcome. Yep. Well, now compounding interest is working in your favor. And we stack enough of those 0.03s on top of each other, and now we have profit margin. Whereas the guy that's like trying to keep it all tracked with post-it notes and, memory and all that, he's not getting any compounding interest. In fact, he's getting a parasitic wearing of his energy. And
that's very well put.
Yeah. So.
And I'll tell you what, man, like I said, you got to start with the strategy. What is it that we want to do? You have to have that picture first, draw it out, map it out. Like I would, as an exercise with my managers, I'd say, okay, let's grab a piece of paper and what's the first thing that happens? Oh, okay, we get a lead. So you write lead down, then you draw an arrow to the right. What's the next thing? Oh, what's the next thing we want that person to do? Oh, we want them to schedule a consult. What's the next thing we want them to do after that? We want them to sign up. Okay, what do we want them to do after that? Right? And you answer all these questions. And if you'll do that, kind of a massive, it may not even be that massive, but like an if-then kind of drawing, on a piece of paper. Just start there, super simple. And then think about each of those transitions, each of those arrows. Am I making sense here?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Each of those arrows represents a process that needs to be developed. So break them down, look at those individually and go, if I only had to manage one lead in the whole world and I could give them the most amazing experience, what would I do? Okay. And then that becomes part of your strategy. And once you do that for all of the arrows, now you have your map of what you need. The idea then is, okay, that's our strategy. Now let's find a way to automate the hell out of this thing so that we can make our business run the way that it's drawn out here on the paper. That's the way I like to think about it.
Yeah. No, it's like our friend Ryan Chapman, I think, is the one who said this to me, but he's like, set it up, draw it out, and then do it without automation and realize how frustrating it is and how hard it is. And then just say between here and here, we can automate that piece. Maybe not the whole thing. Like you can't, as Gary Vee says, you can't automate a hug, right? But
that's right.
You can do a lot of it, and so do those things. So I think we've covered a huge map here, and I want to be respectful of your time. Man, we're right up against it, and there's so many questions.
I'm okay, man. I'm okay.
Yeah. Well, here, let me ask you this. So just going through, number one, find out how to build a system to bring people in and their experience, their first few days. Make sure you share your philosophy in there, core values, why you started the place. Share the story, and don't, you can't share it.
We're talking about an action plan for people that are listening, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Next up, start your lead gen, internal first, and then expand, use the phone. I mean, I'm taking broad strokes here, right?
Yep. Yes.
If you need some help, find a good Facebook ad person, but that's maybe half the plan, half the battle. If it's that much, that's not the problem. Yeah. It's that follow-up. Then bring people in, that gets people in, and then start working on retention. Basically, make a kick-ass experience so you don't lose any of those 5, 6, dozen people you get that first couple months, right?
Yep.
Then when you have those systems and you're going crazy trying to keep it all engaged and make sure this person has that and this person has that, then automate those things and use technology to solve them.
Yeah, I think that's a very good way of looking at it. Yep.
And then they'll become as successful as you and end up loving their business and unwilling to sell their current business, but willing to change what they're doing, which is kind of where you're at, right?
That's right. And I think what they'll find, I know you've caught this bug, as soon as when you start mapping this out, your map 2 years from now is going to look different because, originally it was like, okay, we capture a lead. That's the first part of our pipeline. The next thing they do is we want them to schedule a consult. The next thing we wanted to do is show up. The next thing we wanted to do is sign up. And then it's like, well, wait a minute. Like there's this idea that there's always something you should be doing with a contact, right? Like, so somebody that signs up, that seems initially like that's the end of the pipeline, but it's not. What do we want to do? We want to generate referrals from them. We want to retain them. So let's think about what could we do to generate referrals? What can we do to increase retention? And so your map is going to continue to grow, right? And as you start to automate some of these things, you're gonna be like, oh, yeah, we can add that to this, system or this pipeline. Oh, and we can add this little piece. It's addicting.
Yeah, it is. And when you I can remember the day when I set up this big thing to get leads in for a golf program we were doing in our gym, and I set it up, finally get done at like 4:30 in the afternoon. I show up the next day and my phone's like pinging. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? And I realized I'd set up this automated conversation so that when the lead came in, within a few minutes, they got a contact text, and then it was going back to me. And if they responded, it went to my phone. Well, I got like 4 conversations going on with people. I'm like, what the hell is this? This is awesome. Like it just actually starts working. And then it just becomes so exciting. Like, oh my God, this is the way out of the desert, like you start seeing the light.
Absolutely.
And you're like, this is an incredible experience. So
no doubt.
Yeah. So, just out of curiosity, so you work with a bunch of franchisees and you provide this services and whatnot. And what typically happens when you start providing them with these systems? Like, what are the milestones? Like, they call you and say, "Hey, Rick, I played golf. I haven't played golf in 6 years." Like, what are some outliers that you kind of see as actions success rates here?
Experiencing success.
Yeah.
I think most of it revolves around. I get a lot of feedback on. I mean, here's the reality. This is a pretty robust system that these franchisees are using, and we train them on it extensively in the beginning. But they're like all business owners are going a million different directions, and they kind of forget that some of these processes are happening for them until they get a reply to an email that they didn't know they sent, because their contacts are being pushed through the system, and they get fantastic responses to content, and it just kind of hits them like, oh my gosh, I kind of forget sometimes how much this is doing in the background. And when they start getting replies, does that make sense? Or they get text replies to texts that they didn't necessarily remember. I mean, they knew subconsciously, hey, this is the strategy that we're executing, but nobody said to them, hey, we're going to send this email out today. Let's see if somebody responds to it.
Yeah.
It's those types of things that are super fulfilling. And then we get together for conferences and it's these kinds of systems, they provide the scaffolding for people to be able to really build their businesses and ultimately experience what we all want, I think, as business owners, is to have a little bit of flexibility and freedom and to be able to invest our time where we want to.
Yeah. That's the thing, is like, when a friend of mine used the analogy, says it's like, when you're starting this early business, it's like falling off the back of a cruise ship and you're just tossed and turned, and you can't breathe and everything. And these little systems, as ridiculous as sound, like you still got to swim back to shore, right? But which direction the bubbles are going, like, and then which direction shore is. And then it's like, okay, you got work, but now you can kind of, when you're on the middle of the ocean, you don't know where the hell to go. You could paddle around in circles, you don't know. But now it's like, okay, well, shore is just a mile that way. So just, you can, I'm not saying go slow, but you can slow up a little bit because you know exactly where you're going, and you can break this into like some, break this into like some parts and pieces. So I think that just helps people so much.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. I mean, there's so much clarity that comes from having, that's why I think the mapping exercise is so helpful, because if you draw your business out in a flow chart.
Do you have your old map?
Yeah.
Yep. You do? I'd love to see it someday. That's awesome. I remember hearing a story like Walt Disney drew a map of like the movies were at the center. And he's like, no, never stop the movies. And he drew the amusement park, clothing, merchandise, something else. He drew that back before Disneyland even opened.
Well, how can you build that if you don't, how can you expect to build a business if you don't understand exactly what you want your business to do? That is a very comforting process, I think, because it gives you some direction.
Man, I'd love to, maybe we could schedule like a webinar sometime, and if you'd be willing to, and take people through that and show them what there is, because I think seeing it on paper too is so powerful.
Doesn't have to be fancy. Yep.
Yeah.
But happy to.
All right. Well, man, we've filled up all of an hour here. So let's definitely schedule a number 2, like in a couple months. And I think we can expand out on this stuff. If people kind of want to get a hold of you or like what you've talked about and they want to maybe talk to you more, you mind if they reach out to you?
No.
How can they get a hold of you?
Yep. Oh, my email address is Rick, RICK, at 25, the numbers, then 40 spelled out, FORTY, co.com, 2540co.com.
All right. Where's the name come from?
The name comes from the book of Matthew. chapter 25, verse 40, which talks about the scripture says that what you do unto the least of these, you do unto me. So it's a service-based scripture, and it's just really at the core of what I've tried to build our business and our business's culture around, which is service. And
That's
if we
awesome,
focus, I know that if we focus on treating everybody that we interact with to the highest level we can, then everything else will take care of itself.
Awesome. Well, that's 2540co.com.
You got it. Rick at 2540co. That's also one of those domains that you establish before you realize you're going to have to tell people what your email address is.
Yeah. That's funny.
But anyway.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, man.
Hey, my pleasure. So Rick Anderson, been a franchisee. He's been a trainer. He's been all these things. So he understands the system. So when he's saying these things, I don't want to, this pun is not intended here, but it's gospel. He's seen all sides of it and now servicing the franchisees who are in the trenches doing it. I think if you go back and listen, he shared quite a few gold nuggets here. So Rick, I really appreciate your time, man.
You're welcome, buddy. Anytime.
All right. On behalf of Rick Anderson, this is Dr. Josh Satterlee saying, go out there, maximize your license, and live the life you dream of. Thanks a lot, Rick.
Thanks so much for checking out these videos. I hope they're useful. We'll cover things like rehab, exercise, business model, progressions, layout, everything else that helps you build a clinic. So if you're interested, you can click here, there, here, or anywhere to get more videos just like this. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you soon.